Bubba, they dressed him up, and the picture's going to be with him for the rest of his life.
Oh, I love it.
Okay. Needs a corner.
Yeah, pictures like that. Yeah.
Oh my God, I tried to start. Okay.
Oh, you're gonna get one.
Okay, I'll call this meeting to order for the UCF Presidential Search Committee. It's covered by the Sunshine Law, and the public and press are invited to attend. Karen, please call the roll and confirm a quorum for voting.
Chair Beverly C.
Here.
Vice Chair Alex Martins. Here. Governor Tim Serio.
Here.
Mr. John Giuliano.
Here.
Dr. Andre Garcia.
Here.
Dr. Michael Georgopoulos. Mr. Timothy Hill.
Here.
Dr. Barbara Jenkins. Dr. Vicki Lorzell.
Here.
Ms. Madeline Mills.
Here.
Dr. Cynthia Munoz.
Here.
Mr. David Odahowski.
Here.
Dr. Kathleen Plinsky. Here. Trustee Bill Self. Here. Dr. Stella Sung.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Karen. First, I'd like to express my gratitude to all of you for agreeing to serve on this committee for this very important job. You represent our students, faculty, staff, foundation and alumni boards, Board of Governors, Central Florida community. Most importantly, from my perspective, all of you know the university very well. As a committee, we have an incredibly important task in front of us. I want to reiterate that this search will be inclusive, collaborative, and transparent. As a committee, we'll seek out candidates who would accelerate UCF's trajectory in academic and research excellence, student success, diversity and inclusion, and strengthen our community through partnerships. At this time, I'd like each committee member to share your name, professional title, and what constituency you represent for the committee. So, Cynthia, may we start with you?
Well, good morning. I'm Dr. Cynthia Munoz. I serve as Director of HSI Culture and Partnerships at UCF, and UCF was designated a Hispanic Serving Institution earlier this year, and representing that community and all of the diversity that is represented within that community.
Good morning, I'm John Giuliano. I am the chair of the UCF Foundation Board, so I'm representing the foundation team, development team.
Thank you, John. Vicki?
Hi, I'm Vicki Lorzell, and I'm an associate professor in the College of Nursing, and I represent faculty.
Good morning, everyone. Really excited to be on this committee. Timothy Hill. I am a graduate student and member of the UCF President's Leadership Council.
Good morning, I'm Kathleen Plinsky. I serve as Executive Vice President and Provost of Valencia College, and I am representing the powerful partnership of Direct Connect to UCF.
Good morning, Bill Self. I'm an associate professor in the College of Medicine. I'm the associate director of the Burnett School of Biomedical Sciences. I'm also the chair of the Faculty Senate here representing the faculty.
Good morning, I'm Alex Martins. I'm the Vice Chair of the Board of Trustees here at the University of Central Florida. In my full-time role, I serve as the CEO of the Orlando Magic.
Beverly C., Chair of the Board of Trustees.
Good morning, my name is Tim Serio. I'm a healthcare and administrative law lawyer in Tallahassee, and I'm the Board of Governors representative on the search committee and a member of the BOG.
Good morning, Barbara Jenkins, Superintendent, Orange County Public Schools. I represent your future customers and students, as well as a very proud three-time alumni.
My name is David Odahowski. I'm President, CEO, and Trustee of the Edith Bush Charitable Foundation. I'm representing the community, but with a particular interest in philanthropy and volunteerism. Tomorrow's National Philanthropy Day, so happy Philanthropy Day to everyone.
Good morning. My name is Madeline Mills. I'm the Student Body Vice President, and I represent the students.
Good morning, Dr. Andre Garcia, Senior Manager of Advanced Programs at Collins Aerospace, representing the Alumni Board and 300,000 strong.
Good morning. I'm Stella Sung, Director of UCF CREATE, which is the Center for Research and Education in Arts, Technology, and Entertainment. I am a Pegasus professor out of the College of Arts and Humanities.
Good Good morning. I'm Michael Georgopoulos, the Dean of the College of Engineering and Computer Science. I would like to think that I represent all the deans and their respective stakeholders in their colleges.
Thank you, everyone. So on to the charge. The search process allows for another platform to share UCF's story on the state and national level and highlight the trajectory of the university. Today, the committee's primary task is to consider the search firm's proposals, interview the firm's representatives, and make your recommendation or recommendations to me, the chair, on which search firm to engage. I'll consider your feedback and take a final recommendation to the Board of Trustees. This committee will be responsible over the next several months for identifying finalists for the Board of Trustees to consider, with the goal of having a new president start summer of 2020. The Presidential Selection Process Guide was last amended and approved by the UCF Board of Trustees in July of 2019. The selection guide was sent electronically last week, and a copy of it is also in today's meeting materials packet. Included within the selection process guide is the search committee charge and the leadership statement. I'll take the opportunity now to read the charge to the committee. The search committee, appointed to advise the Board of Trustees of the University of Central Florida, is comprised of 15 members. The committee's chair is Trustee Beverly C., and its vice chair is Trustee Alex Martins. The search committee is charged with recommending to the trustees, not later than spring of 2020, an unranked list of 3 to 5 individuals who are well qualified to lead UCF as its next president. The search committee is asked to base its recommendations upon the leadership statement adopted by the Board of Trustees, as well as the trustees' established equal opportunity and affirmative action policies, which we will hear about shortly. The board chair asks the search committee, assisted by the search firm, to conduct the following activities in discharging its duties. Actively solicit nominations and applications from a diverse group of well-qualified persons. Screen applications using the leadership criteria as a basis for choice. Assist in arranging campus visits for finalists. Report to the board a summary of campus and community reactions to the finalists. Ensure that appropriate information about the university and the presidency is provided to candidates at each stage of the screening process. Ensure that appropriate confidentiality is strictly observed with respect to applicants and to the committee's internal deliberations. Submit more than 2 qualified candidates to the Board of Trustees for consideration. Comply with the requirements of Board of Governors Regulation 1.002. A copy of that is in your materials today. Once again, the Board of Trustees extends its gratitudes to the members of the search committee for accepting this demanding assignment. You have the trustees' warmest wishes for a successful conclusion, and the future of the university rests on your wisdom. And that concludes our search charge. I'd like to note that the board's Compensation and Labor Committee will obtain an executive compensation study for review, and that data will then be brought back to this committee to establish a range of compensation that will ultimately be submitted to the board for approval. Are there any clarifying questions about the charge for me or for our general counsel? All good? Well prepared? Yes. Okay, so before I open the floor for further discussion, I'd like the committee to receive 2 very important briefings. First, Nancy Myers, Director of the Office of Institutional Equity, will provide an equal employment opportunity review. Sorry, Nancy, you can say that 3 times fast.
I'd let you do it. That's great. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for some time this morning to talk to you about equal employment opportunity review. We are an institution that values equity, inclusion, and diversity. It's part of our mission, it's part of our culture, so certainly it should be part of our search and hiring process. So you as search committee members have the responsibility to ensure that each candidate has an equal opportunity to compete. So what does that look like? First of all, one of your first things out of the gate is to engage in strong recruitment efforts. You'll be working with a search firm, but that does not relieve you of your responsibility to identify individuals that you think could be great for this position. This does not relieve you of the duty to reach out to groups, to individuals who have colleagues that might be great fits for this position. Share that information with your search firm. Have those outreaches occur. What will happen is those efforts and that recruitment work will lead to what you're looking for, which is a diverse, robust, and highly qualified applicant pool. Once you've done that recruitment effort, your search firm should be doing a check-in to ensure that you actually have diversity in your applicant pool. Those individuals that reach the minimum qualifications should also represent diversity across the board. That's gender, race, ethnicity, but think broader than that. Their experiences, their background. Once you have that checkpoint, it's time to focus on evaluation. And I will say this word 3 times, because they say if you say it 3 times, it sticks. Consistency, consistency, consistency. That will ensure that each candidate has the equal opportunity to compete. So what that looks like is you have criteria that you will be assessing each of the candidates. Ensure that all of you are on the same page as to what it takes to meet that criteria, and apply that to each of your candidates consistently. If you move the goalposts for each candidate, maybe one you gravitate towards more, you're not providing that equal opportunity. That is also where unconscious bias could come into play, which I'll talk about in a minute. But stick with consistency. You're on the same page in terms of what a person needs to show, what a person needs to bring to the table to meet the criteria that you set forth, and apply that across the board. Questions. You'll have interview questions. You'll have a structured setup when you speak with the candidates. But it's important to develop questions that you can get the information to evaluate under that criteria. All of your questions should be job-related. This becomes really important when you start to go outside of the formal structured interview setting. When you're in between meetings, maybe walking the candidate from one meeting to the other, that is when the more casual conversations could occur and potentially discussions about things that are not job-related. So I would caution you to ensure that your conversations and discussions with candidates occur in this forum and always are job-related. Now, that does not mean you have to stick to a particular script, right? So if you have 8 questions, do not feel like you cannot go off those 8 questions. If you need to develop the answer further, please do that. If there's information in the applicant materials you want to develop further or understand better, do that. Okay, so the consistency does not mean do not develop the information fully so that you can evaluate. This is critical. Your committee discussions should occur in your committee meetings. They should not be sidebar conversations, side text, emails. I know Scott's going to talk about Sunshine Law. This keeps you in compliance with Sunshine Law, but it also allows the entire committee to be part of that discussion. When you have the sidebar conversations, you miss out on what the 15 perspectives that are brought here today and should be part of that discussion. So it's critical to keep those evaluative discussions here when you're speaking and meeting as a committee. Unconscious bias. So I mentioned consistency keeps unconscious bias in check. But what is that? We are all human. We all have our individual experiences, things that we've been exposed to, and we develop biases based on that. That's part of being human. So if we have a bias, that can impact our decision-making process. We might gravitate towards someone because they think more like us, look more like us, come from the same area we grew up in, pick the item. And you don't want that to be part of your decision-making process. You want your criteria to drive your decision-making process. So the first thing you need to do is actually have an awareness that we have unconscious bias. And the way that you can go about that, I put the link up there for the Harvard Implicit Bias Test. They're very short tests that you can take to check yourself on what biases you might have. so that when you're evaluating the candidate, and if they represent one of those characteristics, you can stop yourself and be aware and check that bias to make sure that's not actually impacting how you're evaluating that candidate. Your consistency in your process will also protect you from having that unconscious bias play in, okay? Your structured interviews will protect you from that unconscious bias coming in. I would also caution you to not think prematurely about your candidates. Give them the opportunity to demonstrate what they can bring to the table. Now, what if one of your committee members or several of your committee members seem to have moved that goalpost unintentionally? You as a committee member have the responsibility to say something. You know what, I think we actually credited someone else that had a similar experience, or we didn't credit someone who had a similar experience. Can we talk about that again? You can check on each other to keep that consistency in place. If you have a vote and you feel like someone did not move forward in the process that you think should have, you have what we call the right of inclusion, which is essentially a motion to reconsider. So you bring to the committee, I'd like to exercise my right of inclusion, and talk about the candidate you feel did not move forward and why you think they should move forward. Again, it's another opportunity to make sure everyone is applying that criteria consistently, and the candidates are moving forward to have that equal opportunity to compete. You are not alone in this process. You have resources here on campus, my office, the Office of Institutional Equity, General Counsel, Human Resources. We are here to help you, guide you along the way, along with the search firm. Please do not hesitate to reach out with questions. You also have written materials in front of you. I would encourage you also to look at our search and screening guidelines. That will give you the big picture in terms of how a search operates from beginning to end. I would also encourage you to to review the interview questions as you're developing that through your process. That will keep you on task in terms of having that job-related focus that I discussed with you. And then our non-discrimination policy, which is at the bottom there, captures our prohibitions against discrimination and harassment, but also our commitment to equal opportunity to compete for our candidates. Questions I can answer for you?
And answer this, Michael. Are we supposed to rely only on materials that are provided by the candidates, or we can look outside that?
As you move through the process, you would be looking outside that. So initially, you are looking at the materials submitted. That's going to help you decide your first round. As you move forward through the process, that's when you're going to select the interviews. So then you're going to take into consideration the interviews. You will then expand to references, on list and off list. And so that is all the information, and your search firm will help you gather some of that outside information as well.
So, Michael, are you asking if you know people who know the candidate? Are we allowed to go talk to those people who've worked with the candidate, know the candidate,
Great question.
outside the search firm activities, or should we go through the search firm? Is that what you were getting
Yeah, that's
at?
also part of it, yeah.
Sure. So I'd answer that in two parts. One is, let's not forget conflict of interest. So if you actually know someone that is in the candidate pool that you have a relationship with, that you think would be perceived as a conflict, please recuse yourself. That protects the search process, it protects the candidate, and it protects you as a search member. The second question, the second answer I would give to that is, if you are looking for, individuals that work with a particular candidate, I would work through the search firm to make those outreaches. Those are typically called the off-list references. And I would encourage you to do that as part of the process, as opposed to one or two of you calling neighbor, friend, coworker.
And that's so we capture everything that we could share with the entire committee.
Exactly.
But we wouldn't really rely on internet information about a candidate, is that correct?
Please don't. Let your search firm do the research and bring the relevant information to you. Absolutely.
Yes. Governor Syria.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about the recusal. I mean, if we have, and I don't personally, but if there are folks that we know when we're going through this process that we would like to suggest to the search firm that they reach out to, and I just want to make sure I understand the scope of the recusal. I would think we might, if a candidate does come before us or is in consideration, we might put on the record that, look, I have a pre-existing relationship, I know this person, but why would we recuse ourselves?
So knowledge of them alone is not recusal.
Okay.
It's not uncommon for many of our searches to have a colleague, coworker, co-researcher to be a candidate in the pool. What I would pose to you is, how close is that relationship?
Like a business relationship, perhaps?
Generally, well, if your finances are intermingled by business,
Sure.
I would be cautious. If you know them because you're in the same industry, not as much. I would always encourage transparency first. So I know this individual through X work, and that way it is all on the table. But you're going to have the best knowledge in terms of whether you're conflicted out.
And general counsel will help us with those
Absolutely.
decisions. I've found that whenever I've had a question about any activity, that Scott's helped me guide me through decisions.
Absolutely. Those are the ones I would say, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, Chair. My question was similar to Governor Sirio's. So when you say recusal from that particular interview or recusal from the entire process?
Just the review of that particular candidate.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Myers, for coming out today and giving the presentation. You had mentioned that your office is a resource for us. What is the best way to get in contact with you all?
Email or call?
Okay.
Either one, yep.
Email or call it.
Absolutely.
And will we receive a copy of this presentation? Because I definitely want to take that implicit bias.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Anything presented will be available to the public, so we'll also make sure you have access.
Thank you.
Okay. Questions for? Thank you. And now I'd like to ask our Vice President and General Counsel, Scott Cole, to come up and give us a legal overview.
Well, it really doesn't get more exciting than this, OIE followed by General Counsel. So let's talk a little bit about the Sunshine Law in Florida. For those of you who have not served on a Sunshine Board before, Florida has the broadest Sunshine Law, open records law of any state in the country. So it's important that we make sure we all comply with it. And if obviously any questions about it, please let me know. Call me, email me, whatever. That'd be fine. But let me just go over generally. So there's two things. There's the open meetings law and there's the open records law. Let's talk first about the meetings that we'll be having as a search committee. So the open records law says that any meeting of a public board or commission must be open to the public. And the Attorney General in the state has stated that a committee, including search committees specifically, are considered a board or commission. So this body is subject to the Sunshine Law if it's doing a decision-making role. And what that means is this committee will be narrowing the scope of candidates, and so that's considered a decision being made. And so that puts you into the sunshine. You can actually structure a search committee where the committee doesn't make any decisions. They just do fact-finding, and you can be out of the sunshine. But Chair C has been pretty clear that she wants this to be a very transparent process. And so we're going to have the committee be able to make good decisions and also be open to the public. Probably the provision on the Sunshine Law that affects most people is the part that says 2 or more of you cannot discuss matters that foreseeably could come to the committee for discussion unless you're at the meeting. So you can't have a discussion outside the meeting about anything that might come before this committee. You obviously can talk about anything else you want to with anybody on the committee, but if it relates to committee business, you have to only talk about it in this meeting. And also, you're allowed to talk to staff. We're not on the committee, so if you have any questions, feel free to come to any of the staff members, and that would not be a violation of the Sunshine Law. Each one of these meetings, there's a couple requirements that we must meet. One is we must give reasonable notice that the meetings will be taking place. The law doesn't actually determine what reasonable notice is, and we don't have a university rule on that for search committees, although we do for our board, but we'll make sure that we do enough notice that the public can attend if they would like to attend. And any member of the public can attend the search committee meeting, but they are not allowed to participate in the meeting. And so they can sit and listen and take notes, but there is no opportunity for public comment that you would have with the board meeting, but they're certainly allowed to listen. And I understand we'll be streaming these meetings as well, so they don't even have to appear in person. So let's talk about records. So under Florida law, any person is allowed to get a copy of a public record. They don't have to say why they're asking for the record. They don't even have to identify themselves. And a public record is any document which is made or received in connection with the transaction of, in this case, committee business. So any information that this committee receives, whether it's by email or hard copy, whatever, once the committee has received that information, then it becomes a public record and anyone is entitled to it. It also applies to text messages, email messages, which we should not be having among committee members other than official transmittals. But if there were to be emails among committee members, those would be considered public records and would be open to anyone who wanted to get a copy of those. This is the most important one when it relates to records. Your personal notes that you take during the course of this process are not public records so long as you do not share them with others and you don't file them in a permanent file. So if they're on your notepad for your use in making decisions, those are your private records and they will not be subject to the Sunshine Law. Okay, so that's the general overview. Any questions? Happy to answer those.
See?
Yes.
Scott, thank you for that. Those of us on the board are accustomed to working within the Sunshine Law. Can you speak to, and we understand that we can't talk to each other outside of our public meetings about the issues at hand, but can you speak to the other members of this committee and their interactions or lack thereof with other members of the Board of Trustees?
So if committee members are not on the Board of Trustees, then they're able to talk to trustees. That's the legal answer. The practical answer is we want, for process purposes, to have everything run through the chair and vice chair. So if you have questions that might involve the trustees, I would encourage you to take them to the chair, or in the absence of the chair, to the vice chair, so that all those communications are coordinated. You know, the one thing that we want to make sure we do here is make sure that every committee member has the exact same information when they're dealing with the issues coming before the committee. So if they're coordinated, that will happen.
And let me take this time to remind you that we have a board office and a board professional, Karen Monteleone, who's already contacted most all of you. So that's a very comfortable way to get information, ask questions, and get to the staff that you need as well. And it also makes it easy for dissemination of any information that the entire board should have, the committee should have. Okay. Do we have any other questions? Yes.
Madam Chair, yes, thank you. I would just also like to bring up the issue, we were probably going to talk about it later, is that like we have in the Board of Trustees, we should speak through our chair when we talk to the public, when we talk to the press. It's, you know, that's the model that we have at the board, and I would just recommend that we follow that as a search committee as well.
That's a good point.
Yep.
So you can refer all the requests for communications through Karen, and we'll make sure it gets handled properly. Okay, great. Thanks, Scott. Okay, so before we have the search firm presentation, I'd like to have a discussion about the campus and community involvement. As I stated earlier, this search will be inclusive, collaborative, and transparent. So after the firm is retained, we'll work in collaboration with the firm to schedule listening sessions with various campus and community constituencies. Please know I'll be looking to each of you to attend these sessions and represent the voice of your constituency. And I have a plan to have multiple constituencies brought together. I think it's very good if we can hear each other's perspectives. And so we'll be asking you to work with another committee member in the Sunshine at some of these constituency listening sessions, okay? So we'll continue to post updates about the search on the presidential search website, ucf.edu/presidential-search. As we develop ways for the campus community to engage, whether through listening sessions or other feedback, this information will also be posted to this website. So I encourage you to check the website frequently. So now I'd like to open the floor for discussion and allow each of you to share your thoughts on the committee, on the constituency listening sessions, whatever your thoughts are. Anyone have something they would like to share? Looks like Trustee Martins is posing to check.
So let's talk a little bit more about these listening sessions. What do we intend in terms of the different phases of this process to include these listening sessions in, i.e., will it just be on the front end to understand with what our constituency groups would like to see in a future president? Will it be throughout the process in terms of getting the finalists or candidates in front of different constituency groups so that they can have that interaction with the prospective candidates? Can we talk a little bit further about
Sure.
the listening portion of this?
I'd like to hear your thoughts before I make my recommendation. Would any of you like to share your thoughts on how you'd like to see us operate with our community?
Go ahead, Barb.
Alex probably has a better idea.
No, go ahead, Barbara. I'll follow.
So, and I want to thank General Counsel that I still have the ability to talk with Alex about the magic games. Because that's critical. So two things, Madam Chair. I would like to see robust community and constituency input at two phases. At a preliminary phase where they offer what they think we should be looking for in the next president for the university, and then also some ability as we narrow down a pool of candidates that they have an opportunity to interact and give their thoughts, their background, not background information, but their thoughts and their impressions of some of those candidates before we have our final three, perhaps.
Thoughts? Trustee Martins.
Through the experience of our last search, I think we did a fairly good job of getting in front of constituency groups at every level of this process. And I would recommend that we do a comprehensive approach towards interaction with all of our constituency groups, both as we listen on the front end, but also as we do get to some sort of final pool, whatever that number is, whatever that phase of the process is, because I think it's certainly, particularly in that latter portion, gives us that buy-in from all of our constituency groups of, that final group of candidates, and gives ultimately the Board of Trustees that feedback from everyone as they go through their decision-making process.
Madam Chair, I would just add one thing, because I went through something similar with our organization with community meetings. I would recommend it might be a good idea that the leadership profile, that information is actually provided ahead of time so that the discussion is around, have we missed anything?
That's a very good
rather than a free-for-all open mic, which may not actually get to the end that we're hoping for, but a presentation, and then have we missed anything? Is there anything we've left out? Makes for very useful feedback.
Ideas.
And Madam Chair, I'd also like to recommend that we make sure that our campuses, all of our campuses are considered.
Absolutely.
So downtown and whatever other campuses we have. Yeah.
They'd be great venues to have some of these meetings. And online, yes. All right. Any other thoughts? Okay, this was, yes.
I would say that Madam Chair, that there should be some interactions with students to see how this candidate would facilitate in that. We want someone that's welcoming and genuine and sincere, so to kind of guarantee that and have students be able to give their feedback in a productive way.
Yes, and that's the beauty of this committee, that we have so many constituencies represented. So I feel that we'll get very good input from everybody, and we'll be able to recommend wonderful candidates. Yes.
Madam Chair, agree with the comprehensive approach to the outreach because we have a young alumni, we have a young institution, 50 years old. We have a young community, and by engaging all of these constituents, the successful candidate becomes the president that has the support of all of these different constituencies, and that's very important because for the success of the ultimate choice.
Madam Chair, I hope I may have missed it, but what are the avenues for the community to express their thoughts? Are we only talking about public meetings? Are we going to have staff to sort of go bonkers here, but are we going to have an opportunity for folks to submit online, just, their thoughts if they want to submit, ideas of what they have in mind, where we sort of peruse what comes in online?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we'll have that, and we'll have many different venues for meeting these candidates in social settings as well as larger group settings. It's important that we see the candidate in areas that will be part of the job when they're selected.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
as we move forward and provide opportunities for our community to provide their thoughts and feedback, I would like to encourage the committee to also be mindful of language and see if there are ways in which we can provide opportunities for feedback in Spanish. I think of the Central Florida community, right, and our growing population of Spanish speakers, and often this may not be our students per se, but perhaps their families and such, and so taking accessibility into account and captioning and such as well, of course.
That's an excellent idea, and so we'll take that into consideration as we look at every opportunity to interact. Okay? Well, wonderful. That was great feedback. So at this time, we will proceed with the search firm presentations. I've invited 5 firms to present this morning. They all submitted their proposals, and you've received them. You've got sheets to take personal notes on each firm. Remember, these are, if they're personal and you don't share them or make a permanent record of them, they're your notes, and we'll allow you to use those to assist with your review of the presentation. So let me say ahead of time that at the conclusion of the presentations, we'll take a short break and allow you to review your notes and ask you to rank your top 3 firms. And I mean rank them in rank order. I'll then moderate discussion of your feedback that I can use to consider the firm that I'll recommend to the Board of Trustees. So Laura, would you like to bring our first presenter?
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So our first presenter today is Dr. Jan Greenwood, President and Partner for Greenwood, Asher & Associates. Thank you, Dr. Greenwood, for being here today. You're recognized to address our committee.
Thank you so much, Chair. I appreciate it. Good to be with you. I've worked with several of you in the past. It's good to be back with you again. We just recently wrapped up a search here at the University of Central Florida, and it's been a joy to work with all of you throughout the searches. You have a blue folder in front of you, and in response to your urgency about time, I'm going to simply highlight a few points, and then anything more you want me to get into, I'll be pleased to do so. First of all, if you look at the slides, we elected to actually do a printout for you of the PowerPoint slides. You'll see on the second page in that our corporate headquarters is located in Florida. Yes, the Panhandle is part of Florida. So even though we're Central Time Zone, We are, in fact, Floridians. So we chose to locate our corporate headquarters here and have been thrilled to do so. It's been a good move. I think I would also highlight for you on that page that while we focus purely on higher education searches, worldwide, we've worked as far away as China, Hong Kong, and Japan. We do search worldwide from business, industry, government, et cetera. So for example, in Florida, we've placed 2 from government into presidencies. We've placed 3 who had AAU experience in presidencies, and our longest term president of a 4-year and graduate institution in Florida is our placement. So we're quite proud of our track record in our home state. Another thing on the next page I'd highlight for you, the extensive work since 1992, over 2,000 searches, if you count everyone in the firm, we have a huge amount of experience both inside higher ed and outside of higher ed that we bring to the table for you. I think another thing, too, I'd mention to you is we have extensive experience in Sunshine. So we work in the state. We've worked in other states that have various degrees of Sunshine requirements. So we're quite familiar with that and stay up to date with it, of course, in each of the states. The next page I really want to highlight for you, and I'd ask you to remember this one. I would like you to remember all of them, but basically we've worked with 83% of the public 4-year and graduate institutions in Florida. We also have been successful in over 50 searches in our home state, and those were all in the Sunshine. As you know, transparency is very important to all of us. And we've been tracking savings to the state of Florida as a result of arrangements we've made with our universities, and that exceeds $1.6 million. Now, in a budget the size of University of Central Florida, that does not sound like much, but in a medium-sized business, that is a lot. And we're proud of the fact that we've been able to give back to Floridians. The next page, what makes us a quality search partner, I'd mentioned several things. Our business strategy is one where we believe if you focus entirely on, let's say, presidential searches, or almost exclusively on presidential searches, what you end up with is what we in our business call a lot of blockage in the market, because we never recruit out our placements. So if you're mainly doing business with placing presidents of research universities and you can't recruit those out, if those are people you want to look at, then there's a problem. There's a blockage problem. Our business strategy has been to work broad and deep. And that way, first of all, we know who's in the pipeline, whether it's in nonprofits or government or higher education. And we also don't have blockage when you want us to go after a particular candidate. So that's important to consider. But ultimately, the quality of a search partner is borne out in terms of how many of our clients since 1992 have brought us back to do more work. And in our case, with great pride, I tell you 97% of our clients have brought us back. So I think that speaks for itself. I would also mention to you that, of course, you choose who you want to hire. We don't get to choose. So we in the profession refer to it as our placements. But in fact, they're people that you have chosen. But I would mention to you kind of bookends of who our clients have chosen. One of our leaders in higher ed has been in his position 22 years. So certainly staying power speaks for itself. I'm not commenting whether 22 years is good or bad. It's just that's the amount of time. And I mentioned to you also one of the presidents in Florida. He's now been in his position 10 years. But in tracking our placements, the majority of our candidates end up staying in their position 5 to 10 years. There are few exceptions where the board brought them in to do a turnaround and basically do that work and then exit. So there are a few exceptions to that rule. I think that in having a successful search, in our state, we don't need learning on the job. The Sunshine Act is complicated. The process is complicated. The transparency is complicated. bringing outstanding candidates to the table is complicated. So it's not your typical higher education process or search. And in looking at the key factors, one of the things is being able to talk with each other. So for example, during the course of a search, to stay in compliance with FOIA and also with Sunshine, I would be calling each of you probably 4 times individually throughout the search to bring you up to date. Because of course you can't be talking with each other. We understand that unless you're in a meeting. So there's an extensive communication that has to go on so that all of you realize where we are in the search, what kinds of things we're hearing, and where we're going in the market. So that's one thing that we're committed to. We have brought as many as 7 team members from Greenwood Asher to the on-site interviews. That's because it took that number to effectively work it. 38% of our entire firm, from researchers to consultants to partners, have had experience on the ground in our universities working the Sunshine. So just as you think about it, we're committed to that. We bring that commitment to you totally. In terms of also recruitment, diversity is critically important to us. The majority of our firm is made up of women and/or people of color, and we live what we believe in, and we recruit accordingly. So if you look at our placements, again, almost 60%, right at 60%, are women and/or people of color, and we know how to attract top talent to your market so that you have opportunities to make decisions. The other thing I would mention to you, we do a soft skills assessment. As all of you know, because of your backgrounds, a person can be highly successful in their skills and experiences, but if they don't have the soft skills, if they're not a culture match, they're going to be a failure. So it's very important to us that we're able to communicate to you situations in terms of their soft skills, and we are involved in that. And I believe the only device that's been designed specifically to higher ed culture and specifically to the various positions in higher ed. In addition, we have a leadership and coaching practice that can help with transition. Transition here is going to be critically important because it sends a message of stability. And working on stability, both with the board as well as the campus, and the community as well, are critically important messages to send out. So I would mention that to you as an additional added value for you. I think those are the key things from the papers I've given you. I hope you're not offended that they are papers in hard copies rather than PowerPoints, but they're from PowerPoints, so that's what we chose to prepare for you. Chair, let me stop at this point and see what will be helpful to your committee.
Thank you. I'll now open the floor for questions for Dr. Greenwood.
Good morning, Dr. Greenwood. Thank you for your presentation. Since you ran the last search, are there any things when it comes to just process, any things that experience has taught you that what's unique to UCF you might suggest doing differently?
Okay, now by last search, do you mean the one at UCF that was not a presidential search, or the last search meaning University of South Florida, which we recently closed?
Great question. How about both?
Okay.
Seriously, that's a great question.
I would say experiences at the University of South Florida, critically important to be in constant communication with the chair and with the committee members. It's a fast-moving process. In some ways, it might feel very slow at the time, but in fact, it is fast-moving. And the communications, the individual calls, the updating members on the committee, critically important, because you need to bring everyone along so that if there's a hiccup along the way, everyone knows it, and you can work together for resolution. With the last search here at the University of Central Florida, that moved very, very smoothly, working effectively with EEO and working effectively also with the legal office here. And we've been able, of course, to adapt and follow your procedures. While there is a state law and regulations, the universities in the state do have different interpretations of what that means in terms of how it impacts their particular culture, and we've been able to be nimble and work with them on that.
So nothing you do differently?
No, nothing different. It's different that's an interesting word to use. it really starts with your expectations. There are a ton of questions I have for you if we're able to do the search with you, and that has to do with process and expectations. So once that is discussed, I think everything we do has to be tailored to what you expect.
Steve Martins.
Clarifying question first, please, Dr. Greenwood, and welcome. Thank you for your interest in assisting us. Can you clarify the last search that you did at the University of Central Florida? Because I think there may be some confusion about what that search was.
The last one we did was for diversity. So that's the person you just recently hired. I think it's public now, isn't it? Is it public?
City position.
The diversity position, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, everyone on this committee is not daily involved in the works of the university, so I think the clarity and the specificity is really important as to what we're speaking of here. I think there may be some confusion that you did the last presidential search here.
No.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that everyone was clear about that on the committee.
Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. So a couple of questions, if I may,
Sure.
Chair C. When you speak in your presentation about the savings that you've brought to the state of Florida, can you be more specific about where those savings came from and how you came about, those figures that you saved the state of Florida
Sure.
during your searches?
Sure. In doing executive search, there are 3 factors of expenses. One is the fee, and that's the charge for doing the work. This is a professional fee. And in that, the market standard is 1/3 of the first year's cash compensation. That's market standard. Some people will lowball a bid to try to get in to get the work done, and we've followed a lot of those people, remedying situations that weren't closed searches. The second is what's called indirect expenses. Those are the expenses, simply the cost of doing business. And the third is direct expenses, meaning transportation for your candidates to get to you, interviews that you would hold, that kind of thing. In terms of our savings, the way we calculate it is how much in terms of fees have we saved the university by not charging 1/3. The second, the indirect, when we work with the client more than one time, we give them a price break on indirect cost. So that's the second. And the third is, while we can't decide what you prefer to do, we can make observations and recommendations on ways to do it more cost effectively. And so that part we haven't factored into those savings numbers, because that's really a decision on your part which way you want to do your work. Does that help?
Yes, that helps. It's very helpful. Thank you. So I'd like to talk about the work in the sunshine for a moment, if we could. We all very much believe in transparency. We all very much obviously abide by our requirements in operating in the sunshine. It is commonly heard, anecdotally, if you will, that when you operate a presidential search in the sunshine, that it could be limiting as to the pool of candidates that you are able to attract. Can you give us your opinion on that, please?
That's the elephant in the room, isn't it?
Yes.
Let me give you several examples. One search we did for a president that was totally confidential from the beginning till the end. The university interviewed 17 successful presidents. 17. That's extreme. One that we've done, to give you the other end of the continuum, in the sunshine, no individual who was president at a comparable institution or more complex agreed to be a candidate. There were those at less complex institutions. There were those that had been terminated from their position. There were those that, for whatever reason, had chosen to step down from their position. But presidents at comparable institutions did not interview. That's pretty typical. Now, the reason to think this thing through with some degree of clarity beyond what's typical in the press is that there are, if we look at the candidate, we look at the self-serving side of it. People like to be employed. They like to have an income, except for those perhaps who are independently wealthy. So those individuals would like to stay employed at their home institution. but they also don't want to do harm to their institution. And sometimes if you've interviewed for a position and didn't get it, the situation is such that you're harmed back home. You've lost your, is that person really loyal to us? So you've lost that piece of it. But the second and third pieces, I think, are really critically important too. There are at least two situations I know of in the Southeast where two presidents looked at other opportunities at their alma mater. And both of them had major donors with offers on the table for $20 million each. Both donors pulled the money back when they heard the persons were looking at other opportunities. That hurts the institution. So this all starts, and by the way, this issue of confidentiality or not started in the state of Florida in 1993. So it's got a long history. But as you think about it, whether the person is or is not a president is not relevant. What is relevant is your expectations on what the person has experienced, what the person's skill sets are, and then we go and find those people regardless of the position they're in. Now, you do find in some situations there are provosts, there are deans that have the same experiences where they want to be in a confidential search. But I think you can see from the people that we've been able to bring to the table in Florida that that has not stopped us. So we've been able to produce top quality results. But the market does have its own opinions about confidentiality or not.
Thank you, Dr. Greenwood.
Just have a couple of minutes left. Were there any other questions? Yes, John?
Hi, Dr. Greenwood.
Hi.
Your firm just recently completed a search at the University of South Florida, literally like a few months ago, right?
Yes.
I was wondering what your opinion is on what you think the difference will be between the candidates that you went through with that search and the candidates you'll get for this search.
I think that that's going to depend a lot on what your expectations are, because I know what theirs were, and we delivered in terms of what their expectations are. I'm not going to be presuming that your expectations are the same. Of course, one of the differences with your institution as compared with theirs nationally in impressions is the fact that this is a huge, fast-growing institution, that you have excelled and been recognized for excelling at the undergraduate level. That, of course, you've got the medical school, as do they, which is a different situation a little bit. So there's some differences, but I'm going to be interested in learning what your expectations are, and at that point, I can tell you very specifically about the markets. I can tell you also that there are those that we called for South Florida, because recruitment is calling and meeting with people, that said, we're going to pass on this one, but if you're doing University of Central Florida, we want to look at that. So the market has some ideas, too, about differences.
Dr. Greenwood, right here.
Yes. Yes, Chair.
UCF's in a time of transition, and how will your firm come to understand UCF's culture and its future needs as you're looking for candidates for us?
I think that's one thing that makes it very helpful that we've recently done 3 different searches for you, as well as a coaching assignment in order to help with transition for one of those individuals into that role. So I think that helps, gives me a jump start on the types of things going on. Obviously, we do hear of things and complications in terms of the challenges that the board is facing, as well as the search committee. But we feel very able to address those because of this experience is recent.
Questions?
Trustee, you spoke quite a bit to your experience in the state of Florida. Could you speak to your experiences around the rest of the nation, given the open search process here in the state? A lot of our success will probably be derived from our network and your network as well. So how do you compel top candidates from the rest of the nation to apply to an open process like this?
Well, you hope for a really good snowstorm in the Northeast and the Midwest. You know, that's how Chuck Perry started FIU. He started by recruitment in Buffalo. So and that's a true story. So, I'm being a little bit humorous, but I'm also being a little bit serious. There's a lot of interest in Florida. If you look at our state and you look at the preeminence work that's gone on, there is no state, I would dare you to find one state nationally that has had as many top flight institutions advance so quickly as the state has. And the market realizes that. And they find that very unusual and novel. And that, in fact, is going to be the major thing that is a sales point beyond the fact that this is a great university.
Greenwood, we're out of time, and I really appreciate you coming and sharing your approach with our search firm committee.
Thank you. Thank you, and may I also just reaffirm that we'd very much like to do your search. Thank you so much.
Okay. So don't forget to take your note. Transition. Comparison that'll help you. You might want to take some notes there too.
Madam Chair, what is the ITN piggybacking line? What does that mean?
So that's an invitation to negotiate, and that means in the past they've worked through an agreement that FIU had or that UVA had, so they follow the same rules. So that has a lot to do probably mostly with the pricing.
Chair C. Chair, I have a clarifying question, if I may.
Sure.
For all of the presentations that we are listening to today, are we evaluating solely on what's being presented, or are we also allowed to rely on past experiences with any given search firm?
I think we can have those conversations, which we will open this for discussion. I would encourage you at that time to share your experiences.
Thank you.
Great. So our next presenters are Mr. John Mestepe and Mr. Victor Arias, who are both managing directors of the Diversified Search Group. Mr. Mestepe and Mr. Arias, thank you for being here today, and you are now recognized to address the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is John Mestepe. I'm the Managing Director of Diversified Search's practice and office in Miami. And I'm here with my colleague, Victor Arias, who's a Managing Director of our office in Dallas, Texas. A third member of our team can't be here today, Dr. Kim Morrison, also part of the team that would be conducting the search for UCF, where we'd be so fortunate as to be selected as the firm to do the search. She's away, but is here in spirit anyway, I think so.
Thank you for inviting us here to present ourselves and to get to know you a little bit. And we thought that in the time that we have available to us this morning, that we would approach this in two ways. One, to tell you a little bit about ourselves and also to describe our thinking and our approach around the challenges facing UCF in this search currently, and how we might approach that in a way that would result in an outstanding result for you all. So with that in mind, I'd like to ask my colleague, Mr. Arias, to tell you a little bit about our approach, and we have a slide.
Thank you all so much. It's a real pleasure to be here. John mentioned a little bit about the situation that you're in, and so we were just thinking about some of the issues that we think we should just convey to you that we think we understand. It is a formidable situation, but not one that can't be overcome by strong leadership, as you've shown already. You know, the restoring of trust really starts with a search process that is open, inclusive, transparent, and it's conducted with integrity and credibility. And I'm sorry, some of you will have to crane your neck to see that. It also requires, we understand, we feel a sense of urgency. And so we are fully aware of that and are used to doing that, but we also want to make sure that we take care in undertaking this kind of a process, that getting it right is more important than just speed. So it's a balance of both. It's also critical for us to build an impactful narrative in our understanding of this institution. Look, there's a lot of positive things that UCF is doing. Innovation around how to reach out and scale and to empower this community. And so, you know, you're fast growing, you're aspirational, you're research focused. You've got multiple stakeholders and layers of complexity, but you know, they need reassurance about transparency and moral grounding. So just a very important narrative around the real strengths that will carry, continue to carry a UCF forward into the future. And then, likewise, we feel that there needs to be a need to develop a candidate pool with the characteristics that also includes the things we just mentioned, which are integrity and credibility. And our process is multi-layered. We have vetting that also operates within the framework of the Florida Sunshine Laws. We're used to that. And so, you know, we will develop candidate pools. We also have some real strengths in bringing real diverse candidates to the table. And then finally, identification of candidates is critical that understand this complexity of UCF, especially with the many partnerships that you have, with the many stakeholders that you have, and those that would have an interest in the success of this institution going forward long term. So that's what we feel is our understanding of the situation. And I'll turn it over to John, then, who can talk a little bit about why diversified search.
Victor, thank you. And I understand there will be room for questions at the end of our presentation, which is good.
Within your window.
Yeah, we understand. Thank you.
So some things we'd like you to keep in mind as you consider our firm as your partner for this important search. We are self-described. We're headquartered in Philadelphia. We are one of the larger firms in executive search firms in the country. I think we rank 6th. Forbes magazine ranked us the 5th best executive search firm in the country, and as you see on our logo, we're although large, we have practices within the firm that focus in certain areas. Higher education is one of those practice focuses for our firm, one of the oldest practices. The firm was started about 45 years ago by a woman, Judy von Seldenek, who continues as our chair. We're the largest and oldest woman-owned and managed executive search firm, we think, in the world, certainly U.S. Within our higher ed practice, we have a team of people who devote most of their time. So to help you understand this, we're not a firm, a boutique firm that focuses strictly on higher ed, but we have within our firm professionals and a practice focused in that area, as we do in healthcare and a number of other industries. We have a track record of successful higher ed searches with premier institutions, including multiple assignments for searches in Florida public universities, particularly active currently at Florida Gulf Coast University with a provost search there and a dean of their business school search just finishing. We have, as our name suggests and as our track record rests, a history and an orientation to bring diversity to the practice of executive search. Our search was founded by Judy for the purpose of recruiting women into management positions at a time when that really was not a very popular thing to do. And she was a bit of a pioneer in that area. And the firm continues with that tradition and that culture in our firm. So in the past few years, we've done some 22 university presidential searches. 13 of those searches resulted in the hiring of a diverse candidate, mostly women. We have a Florida presence, and our work at FIU and FGCU has taught us quite a bit about conducting searches under the Florida sunshine laws and open record laws, and we've learned a lot about how to manage the search process, the search committee, candidate expectations, and the media that gets interested in these kinds of searches as well. So we're very experienced in that. I live in Miami and have been a Florida resident for over 40 years, so have a great appreciation for what this university is doing and what it has done and where the future is. This is an interesting time for a lot of universities around the country, and when I mention institutions such as Michigan State, Penn State, Duke, a number of premier institutions that have encountered difficulties and crises in their history, which has upset the university and has caused a lot of turmoil. There's some similarities here, and however, those universities got through the challenges and have turned it around and have turned a page on their future. New leadership has helped, and we see the beginning of that with what you're doing today to begin a search for a new leader for the university. As I explained earlier, we're a large firm that operates in a lot of different industries, but we have a very strong higher education practice, which means that we enjoy the benefit in our work in higher ed because we don't focus on that industry full time in a large way. We've eliminated for our clients the issue of competing mandates. We'll only take on one presidential search at a time so that the entire market is open for us. And so we don't have competing mandates. Candidates who might be appropriate for 2 or 3 different positions going on simultaneously. And then how do you decide which is the best match for the candidates? It's an important issue to consider. We will not take on 2 presidential searches for similar institutions at the same time, which is, I think, an important consideration for this committee. We have relative off-limits conflicts with competing mandates. We believe our approach to search Victor and I are 2/3 of the team that would be handling this search. Dr. Kim Morrison would be the third member. We will personally be involved in the search in every aspect from beginning to end. So you have 3 very senior, very experienced professionals dedicated to this search, accountable to you and responsible for the successful conclusion of the search. I believe we bring a lot of agility and responsiveness in working with the search committees. We've had a lot of experience. It's fundamentally and foundationally based on a high level of open communication and transparency with our search committees. We prize that relationship. If we were to be selected, we'd all be great friends by the end of the search, I think. So we also have a willingness to think outside of the box, and perhaps it's this firm's involvement in doing high-level executive searches across a lot of different industries and in a lot of different areas that bring us into contact with talented people from all kinds of industries and all kinds of settings, be it industry, be it the military, be it other career areas. The scope and reach of the firm is not limited to higher ed. We have involvements with people in every industry you can think of. And that, I think, has a way of opening our eyes in terms of being alert for just talented people who might fit the right opportunity in another setting and would bring a lot of leadership skills. So those are some of the points we wanted to make with you today, and we hope they resonated with you, and we'd certainly, if we have time permitting, we'd like to answer any questions you might have of us. And
Do we have any questions? Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. So 2 questions. You mentioned not taking on more than one presidential search that are similar in nature. Could you describe for us the difference between Champlain College and Oglethorpe, those 2 current searches that you're in, and how they also would differ from the University of Central Florida search?
Yeah, we are working with Oglethorpe on their presidential search, I believe, there for that institution, and it is a smaller university, historic university in Atlanta. And in our view, the requirements relative to our discussion with their search committee about what their expectations are around the candidates were significantly different from the other engagement that we had, and felt that because of that we were clear in terms of a non-competing mandate.
So I'm not familiar. I just wondered if you'd compare those 2 institutions, one larger, one smaller.
Not only is there a size difference, both institutions are going to the market for a new leadership for different reasons, and what they're asking us to do to identify qualities in candidates were pretty different. A candidate for one was not going to be a candidate for the other. It just would not be a fit. And so we have to make those judgments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Tim.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for your presentation for your firm. My question to you all today is, what excites your firm the most about working with our search committee and UCF as we select our next, or provide recommendations to the board for the next UCF president?
I'll take a crack at that. The reason I joined this firm is because of the breadth that we bring. As John said, we're not the largest firm, but we're not the smallest firm. And so we have, because of the different practices that we have, I, for example, am participating in the board practice, board of directors practice. So we bring great insights into governance and great candidates that might have a reach into candidates that we might not even think about. So we spend a lot of time with our practices and with this kind of a search, and we'll bring the insights of what a diverse candidate might look like, not only in terms of maybe ethnicity, but also the way they think, and maybe even industry. So I think we have that ability. That's part of the agility that John talked about. We're a firm that is not, again, not that big. So we have spent a lot of time with our colleagues, face to face with each other. I was with another firm before, with very siloed. It's very hard to talk to each other. So I think those are the insights that we might bring to this kind of a situation. John, I don't know if you...
I agree. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Alex?
Mr. Messenbay, Mr. Arias, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your interest in the search. Two quick questions for you. You mentioned that you have conducted 22 presidential searches. Is that correct? Was that the right number?
In the past few years.
In the past few years.
Yeah.
Have you ever conducted one in the state of Florida?
No.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then secondly, you spoke to the topic of the Florida Sunshine Law. And obviously, as a board and as a university, we very much believe in the Sunshine Law here in the state of Florida in our work. But, you know, there are also sort of public perceptions and anecdotal evidence or you know, discussion about the fact that sometimes conducting a search in the Sunshine can limit the pool of candidates that you're able to attract. Can you speak to that perception, please?
Yes, thank you, Trustee Martins. In the work that we've done, in the past 2 or 3 years, we've done 5 dean searches at FIU, including the dean of their medical school and the dean of their law school, their business school, et cetera. Some of those searches, there was, at least in Miami, some interest in the community and the search itself and the outcome, and the press was involved and that sort of thing. We're currently doing the provost search at Florida Gulf Coast University and the dean of the business school there. We've done 3 other dean searches there in the past year. And in that relatively smaller community, the press is pretty interested in what's going on, particularly now with the provost search as well. We had, as an example, one of our finalist candidates, I won't say who, for the current dean of the business school search, withdraw at the last moment because of the public nature of a requirement around making the identity and the CVs, et cetera, public information on that search. And he was just at his own institution in a place where he just couldn't stand the exposure. So it can and it may have a chilling effect on a search. And in discussing for several years now with candidates about their feelings about being publicly exposed, it's a difficult decision for them to make. And timing plays a role into this. Even if I'm interested in the position, maybe it would be better for me to wait until the end of the search to jump in. And then I can also assess who I would be competing against as other candidates. So there's that kind of dynamics relative to timing. But depending on the candidate's own circumstances, they may have such a relationship with their own trustees at their university and their own chair that they can discuss their interest in another opportunity and not jeopardize their current situation, which is a reality, and it happens, and it keeps a lot of good candidates from stepping forward with an interest. Now, we will typically get calls from candidates just to discuss the search, and having a verbal conversation on the phone does not, in our view, violate the Sunshine Law, at all. And we're happy to talk to candidates about it. But once they formally submit their CVs and their cover letters and their letters of reference to us for delivery to the search committee, those documents become public information. And many of the universities will post those, and so they become public, or they're required to produce them if they're asked for. So I wish it weren't so. I do think that it does have a chilling effect on having some candidates well-positioned and well-qualified from stepping forward, even if they're very interested and very secure where they are. There's a lot of things that go through their minds in terms of trying to decide whether or not they're willing to do this and risk their current situation. So I think in a way I wish some searches in Florida were exempt from the law. I know there's been efforts and attempts to make that the case, but it hasn't. So we deal with it and we work with it. And I think some of the advice that we can provide candidates along the way about how to manage their candidacy can be helpful to them, and feel as though that they have a friend in the process and that they can move forward if they're interested. So thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're at the end of your time, and we very much appreciate you coming in, talking to us about our search.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you all. Good luck.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So committee, I know you're going to be thrilled to hear me say we have a 10-minute break, which means you will be back here no later than 10:37. I'll give you a few extra seconds.
Thank you.
Mr. Alberto Pimentel, Managing Partner from Storbeck, Pimentel and Associates, for his presentation. Mr. Pimentel, thank you for being here today, and I will now turn it over to you to recognize the committee.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all, and appreciate the opportunity to come meet with you this morning. Storbeck, Pimentel and Associates is one of the nation's largest women and minority-owned firms specializing in higher education. Our focus has been, since its inception, in representing universities and colleges across the country and finding talent at all levels, starting from the dean level up to the presidencies. In our tenure as a firm, we have done presidential searches for many of the large public universities in the country and many of the AAU institutions in the country. So our experience in representing large, complex public institutions as they seek new leadership has been not only extensive, but it's been riddled with the placement of women and minority candidates as we've gone through this. Our focus then is one of helping match talent with interest. So as I've looked through your background and tried to understand the university in more careful detail, there appears to be, from my perspective, a good match between what you represented as an institution as well as what our interests are as a firm. And for us, that's quite important. There needs to be a good fit. Our firm has offices throughout the United States with core offices in the East Coast as well as in the West Coast. The consultants serve on a national level, so every search we do is a national search. And know that as we take on searches, we try to be careful not to make sure that there's no potential conflict so as to be able to pursue candidates at an aggressive pace. As I looked at your background, the profile of the university, the things that I think are a positive sell that I think would be beneficial, especially in this cluttered environment. Right now, you may be aware that there are about 107 presidential searches going on as of today. And that doesn't count about a dozen that are just not being publicized anymore, but are actually taking place. One of the challenges that this search will have is playing in a crowded market space. Now, not all 107 are problematic for you, but there are a handful that are going to be competitors to you. And that includes the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, UC Merced, UMass Boston, UNLV, University of Wyoming, UN Reno, Stony Brook, and Rutgers. Those are the ones that are, whether they're at your tier or not, doesn't matter. You're going to be playing in that market space, given the size of your institution. That said, you have some very unique characteristics that I think would separate you from the other institutions. Primarily is your mission. The idea of using the size as a way to promote excellence and to have impact, that is going to sell well with potential candidates. The size of the institution and the impact that you can make is what's going to be the attractive piece for potential candidates. The other part is that you're still a very young institution. In higher education circles, this is still a baby. On the other hand, it's a baby with a heck of a lot of strength. And you're doing some terrific work. The research productivity that you have at about 190 million right now, that's going to be attractive. Because that allows the foundation for someone to build upon and not have to start from scratch. So the 190 million really puts you in pretty good stead. The fact that you've focused on quality, not just size, the combination of two is going to help. When I saw that your incoming freshman class, the undergrad at the undergrad level has an incoming GPA of 4.15 or so, that's impressive. That shows that what you're doing is you're paying attention to not just growing for the sake of growth itself, but you're really looking at how you're going to grow. And I think that's going to be attractive to potential candidates. The fact that you have the right combination of schools is going to be also attractive. It makes you separate and different and distinct from some of the other institutions. Having a med school, having health sciences, having School of Engineering, it's not that other institutions don't have that combination. It's your relative youth in those areas, which means that you could be flexible. You're starting with a completely different paradigm. And I think that as I look at it, in positioning this opportunity in a marketplace that's crowded, these aspects are going to be extremely attractive. So now it's just a matter of who could tell your narrative in the most compelling way and get excited about it and get others excited about it so that it does distinguish you from the other campuses. We think we have the ability to do that for you. We think that given our experience in representing institutions that have been rapidly growing, understanding what it means to position yourself with excellence as a foundational thought, given that you have a very aggressive strategic plan, I think that we could put you in the front, put your institution in front of individuals for whom this will be completely inspiring and enticing, and for whom you would be very excited about. So with that, let me stop and answer questions. I'm sure you have questions you'd like to have answered, and I'd like to provide the responses to those questions.
Questions? Alex?
Mr. Pimentel, thank you for your interest in the search. Thank you for being here. A two-part question for you. First, can you describe your firm's experience in dealing in searches in states with comprehensive public records laws and where searches take place in the public? And secondly, can you well, let me start by saying that we very much believe in our state's public records laws, and we follow them very closely here at the University of Central Florida. Having said that, there is a lot of chatter in the marketplace, anecdotally, about the fact that sometimes conducting a search, in a state with broad public records laws can limit the candidate pool. And I'd like to hear your opinion on that.
Got it. So let me start with the first question. It seems like the story of my life. We do a lot of work at four institutions that require a great amount of disclosure. So whether we're working in Washington, Nevada, whether we're looking at Illinois, whether we're looking at here in Florida. I did the last presidential search for Florida State University that appointed John Thrasher. And for some of you who've been around, you might recall that it was a rather spirited search. Mm-hmm. And I guess so the experience base is something that we have extensive experience. I think that when I look at the searches I do, probably about 3/4 of them are for public institutions where if it isn't state mandated, the institution wants to do it anyway. So it's nothing new. The question is how you do it, and how do you protect the identity of the candidates in a way that the candidates feel comfortable. So it's how you handle that part of the process that makes the difference, more so than whether or not it's going to be an open or what we call a closed search. The question relative to what does it do to your candidate pool? I don't know. I've heard over and over again the idea that it limits the quality of the pool. I don't believe that. I think what it does is it generates a different type of pool. To be clear, does it have an impact? Sure, it does. What it will do is it will impact one group and one group only, and that is your sitting presidents. By and large, sitting presidents, not all, but the vast majority of them can't afford to be involved in other searches where it's going to be public nature, because the ramification of doing so could be deadly to their career. That part is true. But there's 130 research universities in the country. There are more than 130 people who know how to do this job and do it well. And so all that means is that you go at it from a different perspective. And it doesn't mean you're going to take all the presidents off the table. You will take most of them off for sure. But you'll have individuals who occupy a variety of different other roles where the talent is just as strong. All these presidents weren't born presidents. They all had their first presidency somewhere. And I think that what you're going to find is that you'll have a rich pool, but you're going to have a rich pool because of the quality of this institution and what you have to offer, more so than whether or not someone's concerned about the exposure. And you'll find that for the right institution, when it's a match with the right individual, the individuals are willing to take that step and sacrifice that exposure. If you just look several years back when I did the Florida State University search, we were told immediately when we started, you're not going to get anyone of any value applying. And yet I think if you saw the pool there, the slate that was presented, it was a very strong slate. And it's because of what that university had to offer at that particular point in time. The potential of the university is what's going to drive the search. So will it impact? Yes. Will it be a significant impact? No. And I do think that you're going to be able to develop an extraordinarily strong pool of candidates and do things under the light of day in a way that makes sense. Now, what you do need to do is you need to, having done these type of searches where a lot of exposure is necessary, what you do need to do is explain to the candidates what exposure is going to look like, when it's going to happen, and how it's going to happen. You do need to do that. Next thing you need to do is, as you're advertising and recruiting, you need to tell folks up front that's what's going to happen, right? So there are no surprises. And as long as you do that, you're going to be fine. Where candidates get irate is when it becomes public without their knowledge, or they weren't told, or no one bothered to explain how it was going to roll out. Other than that, you're going to be fine. The quality of this institution is going to be the driver.
Great, thank you very much.
Here. So I think I read, thank you for being here. I think I read that you have 10 or 11 current searches going on. Talk to us some about how you keep those candidate pools robust, or do you combine candidate pools? How do you manage 11 presidential searches?
So that's firm-wide. So I personally am not doing that, right? So it's firm-wide. Now, part of what we do is make sure that we're not looking at institutions where there's going to be a conflict. So we're not drawing from the same pool of candidates. That becomes a bit challenging, because at the end of the day, candidates, because these are public searches, candidates could apply for whatever positions they wish. And in order to try to keep them separate, the only way to do that is to try not to take on searches of similar type institutions. So if you look at the search list that we have currently, they range from small liberal arts colleges where you absolutely will not be in competition with, to institutions that are four-year comprehensives, which is different from what you are, right? I'm currently was asked to do the search for the University of California presidency, but it's a system position. That attracts a completely different pool of candidates than the campus level. And so that's how we handle it, so that we don't run the risk of trying to share a pool of candidates. Sharing a pool of candidates is not a good thing. It's because at some point someone's going to be disappointed, and it's very difficult to explain why that happened when you're running the same search, when you're conducting both searches. So we try to position ourselves in such a way as to not to have that happen.
Any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So can you explain in a little bit more detail how do you do the discovery, finding the candidates for the particular position?
Oh, thank you for asking that. It really starts with the listening sessions, and not, like, I've done a lot of presidential searches, but it would be error on my part to come in to assume that just because I've done other presidential searches that a one-size-fits-all is going to work here. It doesn't. Your ambitions are different, the potential is different, the resources you have to make things happen different. You're one of the largest universities in the country. That in and of itself changes the complexity of the situation. You're also redeveloping and rethinking how you transform higher education in quite a meaningful way. All those aspects are quite different. My challenge then is going to be to take a deep dive and understand what that really means. How is that actually being played out? How are you implementing? How are you just taking it from the conceptual to the implementation phase? To do that, I need to learn from all of you. This is not one where I could just come in and say, well, I've done something like this, let me try it. What it would mean then is we start with the listening sessions, listening tour, listen to the different campus constituents at all different levels. It means that we get more feedback from the board. It means that I depend on you as a committee to educate me on what it is that you really are looking for, what the priorities are, and how those priorities need to be lived out. Look, when you look at the list of presidential searches and you look at the ads, I challenge you. Look at all the presidential ads, put them all side by side, cover the name of the institution, and tell me if you could tell the difference between one and the other. All I'm going to talk about the need for leadership, good communication skills. They're going to talk about appreciation for shared governance. They're going to talk about transparency and inclusion. They're going to talk about diversity. They're going to talk about someone that's going to promote excellence. I mean, that is what you're going to see in all of them. So the big difference then is how we position it. So first part is listening. Second part is creating a narrative. A narrative needs to be compelling. It needs to be engaging. It has to be able to tell your story the way you want your story told, in a way that will excite people on the other end of the phone. Third part then is taking what it is that you said you're looking for and find those individuals across the country who are not looking for a job. I'm not worried about those looking for a job. They're going to find me. I'm concerned about those who are not looking for a job and trying to figure out, how do I get to that individual and provide them with a compelling enough story that convinces them to go from, no, I'm not interested, to maybe I could be interested, to, hey, it's looking pretty darn interesting, to, hey, I'll take the job if offered. And so the way we do this is by taking what we're learning about the institution. There are certain things I could assume. I look at where you are, look at your trajectory, so that means you're probably going to want someone from an aspirational university. Right? I mean, it may be wrong, but I'm going to assume that. I'm going to assume that the individual that you're going to be looking for, if we're going to stay within the traditional ranks, is going to be someone who has already proven themselves in several different fronts. Someone who's a strong fundraiser, someone who knows what academic excellence looks like, someone who's already demonstrated by deed and action their commitment to diversity, someone who, given the number of first-generation college students y'all are serving, someone who understands that first-generation college students are not the same as all the other students, and therefore, in order to hit your student success metrics, you're going to have to do something different, and you need someone that has already been in that world. You're going to need someone that's already been in a research university that understands what it takes to increase research productivity. Because the space you occupy, you start getting into rarefied air. No one ahead of you is going to give it up to you without putting up a fight. And so you need to be able to be aggressive and combative in that way. And I mean combative in the most collegial sense. But nonetheless, that's the environment. So when we look for candidates, we're looking for candidates that are going to have some of those skills and characteristics already proven. When we identify them, our job is to get them excited about the opportunities, to call them, to engage them. It's going across using our professional network to identify who those individuals are. It's looking at professional associations, identifying individuals that way. It's looking at who are the movers and shakers in higher education currently and inviting them to the table, talking to them so that if they're not interested, talking to them and saying who else is like you that would make some sense for this particular role. It's looking at this from a variety of different angles that are somewhat non-traditional. Now, you'll have to tell me whether or not you're looking for a non-traditional candidate, a candidate outside of higher education. If you are, there's a series of things that we would need to do there that are different from attracting the academics. But that would be how we would start. Did that answer your question fully? Thank you.
Yes, John.
So you had mentioned conducting the search at Florida State, and I liked your word for it, that it was spirited. Were there any lessons that you learned during that search, since that's also a major university inside of Florida and the records law that we have? Was there any lessons learned during that search that you could apply to this search?
Yes, there are several. First and foremost is you have to have a well-thought-out game plan before you start. Having a game plan isn't well thought out, and then changing the game plan shortly after you start is only going to agitate people. So put it out there, tell them what you're going to do, and then do what you say you're going to do. Right? That's number one. Number two is once you attract the candidates, a certain thing starts to happen within the academy. Part of it is by creation of the process, and part of it is just the environment. So here's what's going to happen. I talked about going after candidates who are not currently on the job market. It's a funny thing. The minute they say yes to me, guess what they do? They look at all the other opportunities and start marketing themselves to the other opportunities. Even if they said no before, even if they weren't interested before. Human nature. The second thing that happens when you engage somebody who isn't in the job market is the current institution finds a renewed sense of value in that individual. Makes sense. And so what you have to then do, one of the lessons learned, is you have to move quickly. You can't leave those candidates out there for very long, because they will look at other opportunities, or they'll get a counter from the current institution that would then exclude them from you considering them. That was number two. Third thing that I think is really important in this type of search process is you need to vet the candidates before they go public. Because once they're public, everyone's going to check into them. And then there's no pulling back. And so if there's anything in their background that could be potentially problematic, you as a committee better know about it before the names are released. Because once the names are released in the longer slate, there's no turning back. And then whether it was by mistake or whatever, it doesn't matter. So it's important to vet them beforehand. The last thing is that as you move forward with the process, communication, communication, communication. You need to tell folks what you're going to do, and then when you do it, you got to remind them that you just did it, and then you got to tell them what you're going to do as the next step. You have to take away any of the guesswork with regard to how the process is going to evolve. Even if it's at a point where ad nauseum you've told people what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, you're better over-communicating than under-communicating. It helps really diminish the level of concern, anxiety, and just the energy that goes around these searches. And then I would say the last thing is, it's a public search, and there's no reason why you shouldn't make it as inclusive as possible. It's already public, so since the veil's already lifted, bring all the parties in, involve them, give them an opportunity to provide their feedback, give them before the process, during the process, and after the process. Create avenues for that to happen. All it does is build up goodwill. And so part of what you're doing is you look at these processes, if you look at it only from the perspective of we're looking for a new president, then you've lost half the battle, because the other half of it is how do you extend that person's honeymoon period so that they're able to do the best work possible? So you use the search process as a way of engendering a high level of confidence, trust, respect, and collegiality. And if you do that, then the outcome is much better.
Thank you, Mr. Pimento. Our time is up. We really appreciate you coming and talking to us. And
well, thank you very much. I look forward to hearing from you, and I wish you a lot of luck. This is an important university in the United States, and so you need someone good. So I wish you luck in finding that individual. I hope it's me that helps you find that person. Thanks you. Thank you very much.
okay, don't forget to jot your notes down while we wait for the next.
Chair C.
Yes, sir.
The current president searches that they have, that any of these firms have going on right now, do we know that the list is all-inclusive, or if it's possible, or if they have any incentive or motivation?
We assume they told the truth when they wrote
Right.
their proposal.
And
but I am having a double check on that. Did you have another question?
I mean, the intent of that question was to, make sure, I would rather have that discretion on our side, right, whether we want to engage with the firm that
Yeah, we'll talk about that
Gotcha.
during our discussion and how we'll negotiate. Okay, thank you. Good input. Oh.
This is the seat of honor, the hot seat.
The hot seat. So welcome, Mr. Funk. Founder and president of R. William Funk and Associates. Thank you for being here with us today, and I will now turn it over to you to address the committee.
All righty. Well, good morning again, and thank you for having invited me and my firm to be one of the organizations to present to you. I've always found that the best information in these sessions really does come from the Q&As. I will make a few comments and then welcome your questions. We are headquartered in Dallas, Texas, and over the past 35 plus years, I've personally been involved in over 425 president or chancellor searches. And as we sit here today, the sitting presidents at such places as Rutgers, Purdue, Ohio State, Indiana, the University of Arizona, the University of Kansas, Clemson, LSU, and some 40 other institutions are headed by someone we assisted in recruiting. As you can tell by that list, our primary focus, while we work for institutions of all sizes, both private and public, coast to coast and border to border, if we have a forte, it's in finding presidents for major research public universities. We've done president searches for 2/3 of the public AAU institutions. And we've left our mark, I guess, dotted across the country for working for institutions of that kind. I'd point out just a couple of other things. We're very proud of our efforts in diversity, and we've broken the color barrier or the gender barrier at over 40 institutions around the country. We've won an award from the Women's Network of the American Council on Education for promoting women into senior level positions in higher education. And the last calendar year, we completed successfully 7 presidential searches. And 4 of those placements were, in fact, women. Of those 4, 1 was Asian American and 1 was a Latina at San Diego State. And one of the other remaining 3, the 3 men, 1 was an Asian American individual who we recruited to the College of Charleston. So we've not only talked the talk, as they say, we think that we've really demonstrated that we have a commitment to diversity. Another quick comment, we've worked extensively actually in Florida. Over the years, we've successfully recruited presidents to the University of Florida, Florida State, West Florida, even Frank Brogan to the State University System of Florida. So we know about your sunshine laws. We've been able to operate effectively within those guidelines and feel that we can make a contribution to your search. And then lastly, I would just, everybody in our business talks about stick rate, and that means how long people have stayed. And I could regale you with stories about people like Gerald Turner at SMU, who's, I think, my longest standing placement now at 23 years, or Vic Boschini at TCU. I don't know what it is about that Dallas-Fort Worth atmosphere, but Victor's almost been at TCU for 20 years. But our people, the people we've recruited, oftentimes, when they have moved on to positions of prominence nationally or internationally. And just a few of those, I think we outlined these in the proposal. We recruited David Skorton to Cornell. David subsequently became the director of the Smithsonian and is currently the president and CEO of the Association of American Medical Colleges. And I won't bore you with the others, but of some interest, Alex, maybe from an athletics point of view, the last two, the current and the immediate past presidents of the NCAA were recruited by us into their previous immediate prior positions. So, we're quite proud of what our people have done, both placed them as well as what they've done subsequently. So I think I will leave it there and welcome any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Funk. Question about your experience with searches in Florida, just so I'm clear. I have in my little cheat sheet here, UF, FSU, Florida Poly, and UWF. Which of these are the current presidents that you were involved in their searches?
The current president at Florida Poly is my person. The others, though, were done for previous presidents. Frank Brogan went on to Pennsylvania. I think he retired from the Florida system, went on to Pennsylvania. Chuck Young at the University of Florida was my placement. And then T.K. Wetherill was the result of one of my searches at Florida State. And John Kavanaugh was my placement at West Florida.
Did you place President Young as the interim?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That was in the era of Adam Herbert, I think, was the commissioner. You had a different structure statewide at that time.
Right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Funk, for your presentation. You mentioned that you had broken the gender color barrier at 40 institutions and that you've completed more than 425 presidential searches. Would you be able to estimate approximately what percentage of your placements overall of those 425 were women or people of color?
Golly. It's probably something we should catalog and analyze, but I would guess 30%. Here in Florida, for example, Donna Shalala was our placement at the University of Miami, and she, of course, was the first. But I would guess 30% all in.
Mr. Funk, thank you for your interest in the search, and thank you for being here today. Two questions in two different directions, really. First, you obviously have a lot of experience in large research university presidential searches. Can you explain to the committee how your approach differs in trying to attract candidates for those positions versus others? And then the second question being, you outlined, obviously, your experience briefly in working in the state of Florida with our public records law. And here at the University of Central Florida, we take that very seriously. The transparency is really important to us. And we follow our public records laws very closely. But there is a narrative out in the public when you do these searches in a state that has broad public records laws that perhaps the candidate pool can be limited. Can you give us your opinion on that?
Sure. Before I answer those particular questions, though, I just want you to know to look out for Luka Doncic. He's the real deal.
Unfortunately, we will be seeing him tomorrow night.
That's in Dallas, I think, right? He's coming off 2 triple-doubles, consecutive triple-doubles. Fun to watch, really, just amazing. Let me take the last second part of your question first. I know that this is a controversy, ongoing controversy in the state. And I know there have been bills proposed to the legislature to change the sunshine laws to exclude presidential searches. I would tell you honestly, as a recruiter, it's easier to recruit in an environment where you have complete confidentiality. Sitting presidents are very reluctant to come into a process where they will be revealed before they're selected. I would quickly add, though, that we feel like we can recruit very good people even within these guidelines. But it will be very difficult to recruit a sitting president. And I think therein lies the issue with open records. The provosts around the country, the major deans, they're willing to go public. But presidents often have gifts, donations that are coming in that are dependent upon their being there. And if word gets out that they're looking someplace else, it can jeopardize those gifts. And I know that there are some critics, there are some who think that these should be open, and I'm perfectly fine with that because, as I say, we can recruit really good people, but you won't be able to move into that population of sitting presidents, and that's the concern. How do we differ from others? I think there's a certain similarity between what we all do. We all research the candidates, we all study our clients, we reach out and try to interest those people that we think would be the best match for the institution. I think perhaps one differentiator is that I historically have personally done my searches. I ran it's kind of fun, by the way, in the waiting room, we all know one another, right? And there are at least 3 of us. I ran the Korn Ferry higher ed practice for 14 years. And one of my former mentees, I think, had an opportunity to talk to you before me. So we had a great reunion in the waiting room. So there are real similarities about the way we work. If I've had any influence on some of those guys. But I think the key is, when I came into the business, I was working with a fellow who at that time was known as the father of executive search in higher education. And when one of our clients would call, he would go and have to ask his senior associate if someone was in the pool. And I knew over time that just wouldn't work. You have to be on top of this business day in and day out. The really best candidates don't want to talk to your number 2 or your number 3. They want to talk to you. So I think one of the biggest differentiators for me is that I personally will be the one that contacts those candidates. I will be the one that meets with the board and with the search committee, and then if you want me to meet with the board subsequently at some point. So that's one real differentiator. Another differentiator is probably just experience. Doing these 425 searches, and by the way, 30% of 425 is a large number of women and minorities. There's not much we haven't seen and not much we haven't experienced in terms of controversies. When Barry Switzer was in his last year at Oklahoma as the football coach, we were doing that search, and of course it was surrounded by craziness. Just last year, we did the presidential search at the University of Louisville. And as you may recall, they had some issues with, I think a week after we were asked to do the search. They fired the athletic director. They'd already fired the previous president. I think 6 weeks into the search, Rick Pitino was fired. And of course, it gave the impression around the country that things were in disarray, I suspect, at Louisville. And yet we recruited one of those women, Neely Bendapudi, who'd been the provost at the University of Kansas. And she has just brought that campus together dramatically and wonderfully well. The Louisville are very excited about Neely.
Mr. Funk, what excites you about presenting this opportunity to potential candidates?
This is it's a wonderful question because I think that the story of the University of Central Florida is one of the greatest stories in public higher education over the last 2 decades. The tremendous growth that you've had. I can recall when this campus had maybe 3 buildings, and now I think you have well over 65,000 students. You're playing big-time athletics. Your academic reputation is catching up to your size. The demographics are on your side. People are still coming to Florida and will for the foreseeable future. We're getting all these tax refugees in Texas and in Florida. But the demographics are on the side of the University of Central Florida. So I think you have the real opportunity to do some great things. I think as you transition this institution to an even greater research focus, you should aspire to things like AAU. And 10 years ago, if you'd have said that to somebody, they'd have said, you're crazy. But I think with the appropriate leadership, this institution can do anything, really, that it will do.
Questions?
Mr. Funk, I want to make sure I understand as far as what your commitment would be for your personal involvement. The notes I have say that you'll forego initiating any other search for president at a similar institution while ours is in the candidate development phase. After that phase, are you still personally involved? As much will you scale back and bring in an associate or a partner?
No, I will be with you till the very end, and for as long as it takes. Although it's rare that my searches go beyond 6 months. In fact, I can't think of one that has exceeded that timeline. But it's during that first 3 months when you're trying to build the pool. You don't want to think that I'm using the same candidates for 3 other clients, and that's where we think the conflict of interest is. But I'll be with you till the very end. I'll be at the search committee interviews of the finalists. I'll meet with the board if you want me to meet with the board after that. But we've never, and of course we're relatively small to some of the big firms. But because of, and I fought like crazy, you can imagine that I think almost every retiring president has called me about joining my team. But we don't work that way. We want full-time employees working on these searches day in and day out, not just when it's comfortable or convenient. But I would be your person from the beginning to the end.
Clarifying.
Any other questions for Mr. Funk? No? Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, and we look forward to continuing.
Maybe seeing you again, right? Thank you very much. Luca.
taking notes? I had a really hard time.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Okay, Mr. Paul Chu from Korn Ferry, co-managing director in the global education practice. Mr. Chu, we appreciate you being here today, and you're recognized to address the committee.
Thank you very much. I know this is your time, so I want to make sure there's enough time for you to ask questions, but I'll give a brief introduction and share a little bit about myself, if that's okay, as an opening statement. I co-lead the global education practice with my partner Ken Kring, who regrets he couldn't be here today. We would both be your team if selected to work with you. Just a little bit about myself. I've been in this business for about 13 to 14 years, run my own firm. Prior to that, I'm a former academic. I held an endowed chair at Lehigh University for 13 years. And prior to that, in the private sector as a software engineer. I'm also a professional violinist and conductor. And you're probably all wondering, like my mother, how all this works together. But I will tell you that this rather non-conventional career journey has really informed the practice that I co-lead and the experience that I had as a search consultant, particularly in how understanding how career path and those responsibilities that come with various jobs inform one's leadership style. I think style is really the key to how these things work or don't work. And so a lot of my experience, my own personal experiences has informed the way that I conduct search, and I think that's fairly unique. Our search practice is not one that leaps at every opportunity. We have enough to do. I think my colleagues who were before me are some of the examples of other good firms with good people. We are more specifically interested in engaging with clients that really have interesting conundrums and unique opportunities that provide some profound challenges. An opportunity to build trust where I think we're particularly outstanding, and to bring constituencies together where our approach and our values will be appreciated and leveraged. Our approach brings a very nuanced and sophisticated facilitation, very transparent and ethical process, but most importantly, a methodology that's underpinned by experience that we've had in extremely challenging circumstances where trust was needing to be built, optics needed to be managed, and certainly our deeper understanding of leadership style has really helped us build a record of success in many of our searches, most of our searches actually. Perhaps one of those aspects is really bringing a diverse pool to our clients. In the past, I would say 5 or 6 presidential searches, I was able to place an individual, search committee and the board was able to place someone from an underrepresented group. And I'm very proud of that fact, not because it's just a box to check, but it's the reality that we see in our world today. I'm happy to get into more detail around various topics. I know this is your time, so I wanted to make sure to turn it back over to you, as I'm sure you have a lot of questions, and I hope you're not tired after seeing all of all of the search firms that have been in front of you, but happy to answer your questions.
Questions?
Thank you for being here. So a couple of questions. Very interested in hearing more about your digital talent dashboard, the ability to do straw polling, and how you use that community-facing for transparency as well.
Terrific, thank you. That tool is, I think you're talking about KF4D, the assessment tool. Yeah, so the assessment tool is certainly one differentiator. It is not a magic bullet, but the brief description of that is that it's a bookended process where the candidate assessment is benchmarked against a unique client profile that the search committee, you all, would fill out with us to bring the common words about what were common characteristics to put into words that we can use to drive the search, to drive the evaluation criteria, and to interview people along those grounds. It is not for, this unique client profile is an online short 20-minute exercise that we have the constituencies do, usually just the search committee as you represent other, your constituents. So this UCP, as we call it, unique client profile, is set up such that we can benchmark the candidates, the finalist candidates' results to your particular culture and your particular desires and characteristics that you are prioritizing. So what it does is it provides, and some of you have had experience maybe with this tool, it provides additional insights driven by an interview guide where we can really zero in on some of the things that show underuse or overuse of certain characteristics. And that serves as a way to make better references, benchmark against references, not only references, but your own experience with them, with our experience with them. And it's a behavioral tool that we think has really helped us close our searches with success. I think out of 200 searches that I've done, there's maybe 3 that have failed because, or had to go to a second time because the criteria had changed, not because we didn't find the right people. So I think that's one quality of my work that I'm particularly proud of, and I would add Ken to that list. So it's not a right or wrong answer. Tool that provides a right or wrong answer, a magic bullet, but it provides additional insights in areas where you may not have actually investigated. And I think it's the heart of what I think we do, which is understanding a person's motivation, their propensity to behave in a certain way. And when you look at their background and their career experience, and you hear their references, you get a much better picture. And I think that's what underpins our efforts to do a good job, not just, I've done 200 of these. That's not necessarily our philosophy. I hope that answers your question, Barbara.
Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, thank you for your comments and presentation. I have a question. What do you find compelling about UCF, and how would you take that forward to a candidate?
Well, there's certainly a lot to learn, and I don't want to prescribe that I'm some expert on UCF. But from what I have learned, and actually I've learned about your background too, is very interesting for me personally. I think UCF is on a rise. I think that despite the challenges of the past year, UCF has the distinct advantage of creating its competitive advantage. Unlike some schools that have been around for 100 years with deep legacy and dealing with how that legacy affects its forward momentum, I think you don't have to worry about that. I mean, your legacy since you started is certainly on its way up, but I think Orlando, Florida, Central Florida region has lots of economic advantages. You are a large university that has scaled over the years, influencing a lot of people's lives. Your discount rate, your graduation rate is very strong. You seem to find a very good balance between letting everybody in but being competitive at the same time. I think your yield is very reasonable, and I think there's in this time where education is changing so much in the way we deliver it through technology and not the way maybe that we all went to school, it is a great opportunity, not only to partner with the community and do all the traditional work, but like I would tell you, my current work at Virginia Tech with Innovation Campus, these are schools that are really thinking about the future. And I think you have that great opportunity here because you're not burdened with a legacy that makes it very hard to change.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for being here for today's meeting. My question to you today is, what excites your firm the most about working with this committee to select our next UCF president?
What was the first part of the question? I'm sorry?
What excites your firm the most about working with this committee to identify the next UCF president?
Well, I can tell you from more recent experiences at Cooper Union when the board was being sued, and a lot of people ask me, why would you want to go do this? And I said, because it's interesting. And I find people interesting. That's why I'm in this business. I think I'm a pretty creative problem solver. I think I have pretty good EQ, social EQ. I like situations where the problem is not easy to solve. As a violinist, I can tell you every time I get on stage to conduct or to perform, it is not an easy thing to solve because it's different every time I get up there. In fact, I felt like coming into an orchestra audition, sitting with my friends from other firms. But I think what really excites me is that this is a real challenge. As I said to you earlier, I don't leap, Ken and I both don't leap for every presidential search. As you can see from the portfolio, I'm not going to tell you we've done 50 of these in the past 3 years. I think we're very selective about what we look at. I think our approach, and what you may not know because you think Korn Ferry is a big firm, and we are, but there's really only 4, maybe 5 FTE doing this kind of work, and Ken and I do all the presidential searches. So we can't do many of them in order to say, just to satisfy what a lot of search committees say, well, how many of these have you done? I think the work stands for itself. I think the fact that we can go beyond the conventional candidates says something. A lot of the placements that I've made were from other areas of our nation in terms of their discipline. I am certainly not an advocate of non-conventional candidates, but I think it certainly informs the opportunity. So I think coupled with your question, Dr. Sung, I think I find this really exciting because there are lots of possibilities. I look at some of these challenges as challenges that exist at a lot of schools, many of them that Ken and I have both worked with. But I think the opportunity to bring real positive change, to start helping UCF look forward again, to join you in that effort and to be a facilitator for that success would give me and my colleague Ken great excitement and opportunity, would be very rewarding.
You haven't conducted any presidential searches in Florida?
Let me think. No, I don't believe we have. Certainly not recently.
Can you, with your knowledge of UCF, can you tell me which presidential search you guys have done that you think would be most similar to this presidential search?
Well, there's lots of different aspects to these things. I would tell you that, Penn State was probably the most challenged in the sense of the optics around that. Again, we were asked to come in late in the search. We didn't start that search, but we ended that search. And we partnered with another firm where I think the finalists, Penn State wanted additional insights around assessing character and assessing, sort of independently assessing their leadership capabilities. I think because there was some concern about certain candidates' backgrounds. Obviously, that was very fraught at a very challenging time in the athletic area of Penn State that you all know. I think our wading in brought a tremendous amount of objectivity and nuanced messaging that we were actually going deeper to look at the backgrounds and the capabilities and the style of these individuals to bring some assurance that Eric Barron, who was eventually, appointed, was the right person, and glad to say he's still there. So I think from the optics point of view and the communications and transparency point of view, that one is very similar. I did bring up earlier Cooper Union, which I think, even though it's a private institution, had huge optics around how to manage many, many stakeholders, including a very engaged alumni group. As you can understand, through its history, it has always been a school that offered free education to those who are qualified. And when the former president, started thinking about, charging tuition, it really created a flurry of activity that was, hard to put the genie back in the bottle once that was said. So I think that is similar in the sense that I can't even begin to count the number of engagements that I did with them early in the search to do due diligence. So in many of our searches, because I'm a former academic, appreciate shared governance and shared points of view, people like to be listened to and people like to be heard. So I'm a champion of that process, and I think with some of the tools that we have, both with SurveyMonkey and our personal, town hall visits to kick off searches, we've never had it fail because we've done that due diligence. I almost think that's more important than the end of the search, because if you don't lay the groundwork, it's just not going to happen at the end. So if Ken and I were to work with you, be fortunate to work with you, you would probably see a very strong effort and diligent effort and deliberate effort to cover your stakeholder groups, and that includes the Board of Governors, your faculty, students, staff. We would certainly take your guidance as to how best to execute on that. But that's one very, very important part of the process, which I would share, I think would be very similar in this case.
Mr. Chu, thank you for being here. Thanks for your interest in the search. Two-part question. I've noticed, it's noted here that you did the search for the dean at the University of Florida's Business School. So can you explain to us your experience in working in the state of Florida with our open public records law and how that affects your process, number one? And number two, we at the University of Florida very much believe in our open public records law here, and we at the board and through the university comply with it at all levels. But there is a public narrative in the state about presidential searches and the impact that the open public records law has potentially on the pool of candidates. Can you give us your opinion on that?
Sure. I'll just make an umbrella statement that, look, every university, every state university around our nation has different tolerances for this. We worked in Michigan and other states where there has been, a tremendous sensitivity to FOIA and open records, and that is certainly not anything we're unfamiliar with at all levels, whether it's presidents or deans or vice presidents, provosts. Look, I will be honest with you, that this is a tough part of the task. I don't think any other search firm would tell you differently. But you have a commitment to the governor and the state of Florida in terms of using taxpayer dollars. It's very clear. The trust that needs to be rebuilt here, obviously, you all have to prove that you are, ready to build that trust with the Board of Governors. Your search firm has to do that, and anybody engaged in the process has to do that. I would not tell you that this is a process that somehow has to have meetings in back rooms, and maybe some other universities can do that, but this one can't. So that dean search is not complete yet. I've done other searches at USF and also Miami and Nova Southeastern, as well as Florida State. And how we are prepared to do this is, number one, initial discussions with candidates that we recruit or that want to be part of the pool need to understand that, number one. There is no workaround for this. I think we can assess, as they can assess, how comfortable they are with the process, and that will be a challenge, particularly with those who are sitting presidents who are raising money, or chancellors. That is just a fact, and any search firm is going to run into that. But because I think we have very good dialogue with these individuals, as many of the other search firms will, I think that has to be clear as to what that end game will look like and when they will be exposed and how they will be exposed. We need to be transparent about that for the good of the constituent base here. Number two, I would say that the nuance here is when they opt to come in. If they're unable to do so, if they think they will be able to do so at a certain point, or if they are never able to do so, that's going to determine who is in your pool. Now, if you're talking about presidents and provosts, which is a typical trajectory for somebody who would be interested in this, they're all going to have different issues. If their contract is coming to an end and their board is aware that they may be looking, that's one scenario. But those who are in the middle of doing great things are going to be a little bit more skeptical if they can actually come into that process. I don't think that's going to be different at any other firm, right? What I think we can bring is that when you look more broadly, and again, I am not advocating, I'm very agnostic about who comes into this. I look more deeply to my earlier point about looking at characteristics of their behavior and what informs their ability to do what you need, regardless of where they come from. Those candidates may be more free to express themselves and be a candidate in the pool. At least that's from my experience. Some of them aren't, but some of them are. So the broader that you make your pool diverse, diversify the pool in all aspects of that word, I think you're going to have a more informed choice, and you will overcome some of those challenges that are going to be associated with a highly public search. I think we have experience in sharing the information with you without exposing people before they're ready. But we have to adhere to that. There's no choice here.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we're out of time, so I want to thank you, Mr. Chu, for coming and giving your presentation.
Well, it's fast and furious. I wish you all the best. I would certainly look forward to working with this group, and I thank you for your time and your energy towards this, and best of luck.
Thank you. Okay, so if you can wrap up your notes and put your top 3 firms in rank order, I'll take your feedback under consideration for presentation to the Board of Trustees. So we'll go around as soon as.
So use these or just?
Use whatever they want, right? Should they use the form or can they just use? Either way, whatever you're comfortable with.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Is it possible we might hear some discussion among the group before we actually do our first, second, and third ranking?
Sure.
Or do we need to be private?
No, we can have discussion. I'm sorry, I just jumped into ranking because of the time, but.
I would love to hear other comments and
Yeah, let's
thoughts
do that.
before I do my ranking.
Let's have some conversation. Would you like to start?
No?
Okay. Who would like to
I'm
contribute?
happy to start.
Tim, go ahead.
All right. I'm glad that we were able to have this discussion because I, too, would like to discuss. So definitely, can I share my top 3? Is it like?
Well, not yet.
Not yet. Okay. All
We
right.
get to do that when we go around. If we just thoughts
Or highlights or.
well, whatever you want to share.
Okay. So there were definitely a top 3. I won't share that right now, but one of my concerns is definitely the cost effectiveness of choosing a search firm. Definitely, I feel as though we shouldn't choose one that isn't super, super high, but we should definitely think about what it means for the university, long term, for the financial reasons of choosing the search firm.
So they're all approximately at about the same level?
Yeah.
Was that your concern?
No, but I think that, there is one that is significantly higher than the others. But I do think that each firm has both their strengths and their weaknesses, and they all honestly can contribute to this great search. But overall, looking forward to hearing the perspectives of others as well.
Okay.
So some of the things I was listening for, I was really looking for differentiators. Size being one of the differentiators, experience of working with other similar universities here in state. Some firms had significant expertise in working in the state of Florida. Others had significant exposure nationwide. So those are some of the differentiators I was looking for. I guess, time, resources, and who exactly from their team of 2 or 3 or 4 folks that were going to be dedicated to the search effort. That was something else I was listening for. One of the other points I was looking for here was, were they willing to, first, what other concurrent searches they have going on? It could be just at the firm and maybe not with that individual. But then were they willing to not take on any other similar searches? And I was wondering, I don't know about the mechanisms of it, but is there a way for that decision to be in our discretion?
If the committee would like to have that as part of the negotiations, then we should make that determination.
I.e., basically, what I'm saying is, if they are approached by another university to take on a search, that's our choice, whether it's too similar to us, not their discretion.
Okay. Any other? Yes.
I want to make some comments, but a clarification first. So part of my ranking, what I'm assuming is, and maybe I'm looking to Scott to this as well, because this is an ITN, that we're going to give you our rankings, but you all will have some flexibility, whether because it's an ITN to negotiate a better rate, maybe to have some flexibility. My number 1 happens to be who I thought was the most enthusiastic and knows the system and can go out and sell UCF, but they happen to have some other searches going on. And as you dig in, maybe you think that's going to be fine for a lot of reasons, or maybe you have concerns. Are you going to have, are you taking whoever comes out at number 1 today and that's it? Or is that what you're going to keep in mind as you negotiate? And there may be another firm that's hired after today. That's the clarification I'm looking for.
The chair has the flexibility to negotiate additional term.
Right.
Or add additional conditions as part of that negotiation. You could go to number 2 or number 3 and move down.
And I'm fine with that. I just didn't know how you intend to proceed, Bev.
But Chair C, from what I understand, the way the process is going to work here, I mean, we will try to come to some consensus for a recommendation for you, but ultimately, this is the decision of the Board of Trustees. Is that correct?
Correct.
So the board will actually vote on who is awarded.
No, actually,
Is that not right?
I believe
No,
the process
the
is
chair
the chair decides with input from the board.
Got it.
And so
Okay.
there needs to be a presentation to the board and get all the feedback.
And then the chair decides. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that clarification.
Chair C.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just say that, and I'm sure all of us did this, so I did a real deep dive on all the written proposals, and I didn't make a lot of comments today. And I had some, I wouldn't call it implicit bias on who I thought was strong, but I guess in some ways, when you look at the proposals, you have bias on what you thought were strong proposals and not. But I think it's a very valuable process to bring them here because I think my opinion on a couple changed, which is good. It didn't totally rearrange my opinion on that. And so I think that was very valuable that we had this discussion today. And I also I would say I would push back a little bit on the idea that we have to have an exclusive partner in this where this is the only search they're doing because I think they all bring strengths. And I think that I wouldn't want to limit our ability to find a good search firm and have the best search firm. But I understand the intent of that, is that we want them dedicated to our search and dedicated to finding the next president at UCF. So, yeah.
John?
So I thought it was interesting, one of them said that their processes are all pretty much similar because they all used to work together and they've kind of all born from each other. But I was mostly interested in what they knew about UCF and our culture, right? And so we got a chance and different people asked the questions. Two of the firms spent a lot of time talking about how troubled we were.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, it was a real turnoff.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, oh my God. One of them compared our search to 3 schools that have sexual assault national stories. And I'm like, how is that like UCF, right? So I X'd 2 of them out just because of, oh, you guys got to rebuild trust and we got to get some, and you guys, have some formidable challenges. It was a real turnoff for me. So I have 3 that I like. What order they go in, that's tough because there was a couple that I really liked and there was a couple I really didn't like. But I think it's pretty obvious we want someone who's trustworthy and that we want someone who has integrity. I don't think they needed to tell us that we really need someone with integrity.
Right.
So I just wanted to put that out there because there was 2 that just.
That's okay. I think you were saying what a lot of us felt. Cindy?
Thank you. So I also appreciate, thank you, Chair, the opportunity to listen. And for me, the 3 things that I listened closely for was 1, knowledge of the process, 2, knowledge of our university, our community, and 3, their thoughts and perhaps their approach to the overarching umbrella of equity, inclusion, and diversity, and how that came out in their work, whether it came out naturally or otherwise. And so those were the 3 factors that helped me make my decision with regard to top 3.
I had a couple of thoughts. You first.
I was looking for, of course, experience, the working in Florida, the Sunshine State, the declaration of the status that we're in, but the immediate turnaround that we've got a lot to sell in Florida. And we do a lot of work with the Florida Chamber of Commerce Foundation, the Florida 2030 Plan, and we're the #1 higher ed in the country by U.S. News and World Reports. We're Orlando, 75 million people are coming here. We're well positioned as a young institution for the candidate to really make an impact. And those people who are really wanting to make that impact will come through this process. And so there were, in my mind, 3 or 4 good firms here, and that's my input.
So I was a bit torn. Thank you, Madam Chair, for letting us hear one another's thoughts and more to come. So I had a couple of things in mind. I wanted to hear someone who'd done their homework. They knew the background about the university. I was interested in hearing the use of some solid tools for the selection process. And I have to say, an appreciation for diversity as well as caseload and how many searches they might be trying to run simultaneously. Needless to say, those different factors interact, and one that might have tremendous analytical tools may not have seemed like one who also had a good handle on UCF's background in our current state. And so I was torn on a couple of them, but those were the 4 or 5 areas that I was looking at, and appreciate hearing everyone else's thoughts.
Madam Chair, I was looking at specifically 3 areas, one being experience. I think it's important to have a firm that's done more than a few searches in the past, because we need someone that has a wide breadth of knowledge in what we're looking at. 2, probably the most important, is a culture match. UCF's a very different university than anywhere else in the nation, and if you don't understand that we're different and understand our culture and have done your, research, then you obviously don't want to be the firm that we choose, because that shows commitment. And the last being retention that people want the firm back, that's really important. And also that the president stays at that institution was really high on my list as well.
Dr. Sung.
Yes, so I would echo all of my colleagues' comments, as well as adding that I was interested to see the personality of the actual person representing the firm, because several of them said that they would be the person that would be the contact to any potential applicant.
That's what we asked, that they send the person who will work with.
Yes, so that was interesting to me also, because they would be the outward-facing person that an applicant would meet and talk to.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair C. I appreciate all of the input and comments from the entire committee. It certainly helps to finalize a final 3 ranking, so to speak. My whole approach going into this is, what are we looking for in terms of what a search firm can bring to us? And ultimately, I think what we're looking for, what I believe we're looking for in a search firm, is that they're going to bring us the best pool of candidates that we can possibly get, with all of these variables and attributes that you all have pointed out. And what I was looking for, as I listened to all of them, is, number one, how are they going to tell our story? Because that is one of the primary factors of how they're going to attract the best candidates for UCF. And how enthusiastic are they about our story and what's happening here at UCF? So that was, one primary thing that I was looking for, in each of these firms. The other is tied to experience, but more importantly, what is their breadth of reach of the pool of candidates that they have contacts with? I mean, I'm sure all of us have worked with search firms in the past, and the strength of a search firm is the relationships that they have with the people in the marketplace. And certainly the ability to pick up the phone and, call some of these candidates that are certainly not out looking and interest them in our specific job, our specific position, and get them motivated to start looking at this one. And so that was, an important factor for me to try and listen to as I was hearing all of their presentations. And then finally, by my line of questioning, their ability to work in the sunshine, I think is incredibly important in this specific instance. And the ability to bring a very strong pool of candidates while working within, our sunshine laws were really, really important to me. So thank you all.
So I'll wrap it up again, thanking you all, but also saying I think our story is what's important, really understanding our story and understanding the research element of this university and why that's important in our growth and going forward. But it's not just about their candidate pools and who they know, but it's selling that story to the people that we might bring to their attention that they don't know, and having them be able to convince those that haven't thought about us, didn't know about us through their networks and reach, and convincing them that this is worth the great job and the opportunity that we're offering. So with that, shall we go around the room and y'all can tell me your top three? Cynthia, would you like to start?
Thank you, Chair. Storbeck, Pimentel and Associates, Korn Ferry, Greenwood, Asher and Associates.
Okay, John.
These are in order 1 to 3.
If you like, you can have ties.
Okay.
Storbeck, Pimentel and Associates 1, Greenwood, Asher and Associates 2, R. William Funk 3. Likely be happy with any of them.
Okay, any of those three is what you're saying, yeah.
Okay. I had Storbeck first, Greenwood second, and then Korn Ferry 3.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I also would be fine with any of these candidates. My number 1 was Storbeck and Pimentel Associates. Number 2, Greenwood and Asher Associates. Number 3, Korn Ferry.
Number 1, I had Greenwood Asher. Number 2, Storbeck Pimentel. And number 3, Korn Ferry.
So I had Greenwood Asher as number 1, and a very close, actually I wrote 1A. 1B is William Funk. So they're very, very strong, in my opinion. And then I thought Storbeck did a good job today, so I put him at 3.
Greenwood Asher, William Funk, and Storbeck Pimentel.
You don't go?
No.
All right, all right.
Everybody gets to vote, I get to decide.
I had Storbeck 1, Funk 2, and Greenwood Asher 3.
Storbeck 1, Funk 2. It was hard, but 3, I said Korn Ferry.
At Storbeck 1, William Funk 2, and Greenwood 3.
Greenwood 1, William Funk 2, and Storbeck 3.
Greenwood Asher 1, Korn Ferry 2, and R. William Funk 3.
I had Greenwood 1, Funk 2, Storbeck 3.
Storbeck 1, Funk 2, Greenwood 3.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. So, I think we're done.
Can you go over the results?
Want me to do my final? Okay.
We understand it
It's
doesn't.
clearly number 1, taking all your inputs, is Storbeck Pimentel. And Associates number 2, I have to do a little math here. 1, 2. Yeah, the number 2 would be Greenwood and Associates, right? And then we run out of 1s. Be William Funk. Any questions before we, I mean, I know I'm taking up 6 minutes more of your time, but any questions? If not.
One request, Madam Chair. So as many dates as we may have to get on our calendars, if we can get those as quickly as possible.
Believe me.
So we can try to arrange calendars, that would be so helpful.
Right, we will do that. Karen will be reaching out to all of you, and I really appreciate the time you took today. I hope you felt this was a worthwhile exercise, and thank you for being so attentive and helping us with this.
Great
All
meeting,
right.
Madam Chair. Great meeting. Well done.
Thank you.
Yes, very.
Thank you. Thank you.